The town of Black Hollow had always been a quiet place, the kind of town where everyone knew each other, where the nights were still and the roads were empty by sundown. It was a town with history, the kind of history that was whispered about in the dark, behind locked doors. People didn't talk about what happened in Black Hollow 50 years ago, when a dozen children vanished without a trace. They didn't talk about the house on the edge of town, the one that had been boarded up for decades, the one that still stood despite attempts to tear it down. They called it the house that wouldn't die. Nobody went near it, nobody dared, until Noah did. Noah had lived in Black Hollow his entire life, but he had never believed in the stories. He had always been drawn to that house, its rotting wooden frame, its shattered windows like empty eyes staring into the abyss. There was something about it, something that called to him. His friends begged him not to go. "It's not just a house," they said. "It's a trap." But Noah laughed. "It's just wood and nails," he said. "It's just a story." He broke the lock on the front door that night. He stepped inside, and the house swallowed him whole. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing through the darkness. The air inside was heavy, thick with dust and the scent of something rotting beneath the floorboards. His flashlight flickered as he moved forward, revealing a long, endless hallway that shouldn't have been there. The house was bigger inside than it was outside. The walls were covered in old, peeling wallpaper, the kind that looked like it had once been beautiful, but had been left to decay for too long. The floor groaned beneath his feet. The deeper he went, the colder it got. Something moved in the shadows. He spun around. Just the sound of his own breathing. Then came the whispers, low, overlapping voices, whispering just beneath the surface of the silence. He couldn't make out the words, but he could feel them. They were watching. He stepped into the living room. The furniture was still there, covered in sheets, like the house had been waiting for someone to return. A fireplace sat in the center of the room, empty. But when he looked inside, there were teeth embedded in the brick, fused with the stone. Human teeth. He jerked back. His flashlight flickered again. The whispers grew louder. Then he saw the mirror. It stood in the corner, tall and cracked, covered in a film of dust. His reflection stared back at him, but something was wrong. His reflection wasn't moving. He lifted his hand. The reflection did not. His heart pounded. He stepped closer. The reflection smiled, a slow, twisted grin spreading across its face. Teeth, too sharp, too many. Then it moved toward him. Noah stumbled back. The mirror shattered. The house screamed. Not a sound, not a voice. An actual scream that filled every wall, every floorboard, every inch of space. The lights went out. He ran. The hallway was different now. Longer. Endless. The doors on either side were open, just barely, and from inside each room he could hear breathing. Shallow. Waiting. Something stepped into the hall. Not human. Not anymore. Its limbs were too long. Its eyes, hollow black pits. Its mouth stretched open, too wide. It crawled toward him. He ran faster. The front door was gone. There was only another hallway. And at the end, a child, a little girl in a tattered dress, barefoot, her hair covering her face. She lifted a finger to her lips. But shh, the whispers stopped. The breathing stopped. Everything was silent. Then, in the silence, the thing behind him ran. He didn't have time to turn, didn't have time to breathe. The walls ripped apart, and the house swallowed him whole. The next morning, the door to the house was wide open, but Noah was gone. The only thing left was his flashlight, lying in the dust, still on, still flickering, as if the house had decided it wasn't done yet. The town of Black Hollow never spoke about what happened to Noah. When the police searched the abandoned house, they found no traces of him, no footprints, no signs of a struggle, just the flickering flashlight left on the rotting wooden floor. The old house had swallowed him whole, just like the legend said it would. His friends tried to forget, but the house didn't forget them. It waited, and one by one, it called them back. A month after Noah disappeared, his best friend Carter started having dreams. The first dream was simple. He was standing outside the house, staring at its rotting wooden frame, at the way it seemed to breathe in the dark. In the dream, the front door was open, and a voice whispered from inside, "Carter, come in." He woke up gasping, sweat dripping down his back. He didn't tell anyone. The second dream was worse. This time, he was inside the house. The walls were stretching, pulsing. The air smelled like something rotting deep beneath the floorboards. And Noah was there, standing at the end of the hallway. His eyes were wrong. Not like himself. Not human. And then he opened his mouth. A sound came out, low and broken, something between a whisper and a scream. "Help me." Carter woke up choking on his own breath. This time, he told his friends. They told him it was just his mind playing tricks, that Noah was gone, that the house was just an old building, that there was nothing left to find. But Carter knew better. The house had called Noah. Now it was calling him. The nightmares didn't stop. He started hearing whispers during the day. A voice just behind him, too faint to understand. At night, he'd wake up and find himself standing at his bedroom window, staring toward the edge of town, staring toward the house. The worst part? Noah's parents received a letter, written in Noah's handwriting, but it couldn't be, because it had been written yesterday. The paper was old, yellowed, the ink smeared, like it had been left in the rain. It said one thing, "Help me." Carter didn't hesitate. The others begged him not to go. He went anyway, because if there was a chance, even the smallest chance, that Noah was still in there, he had to bring him back. The house was waiting for him. The front door was unlocked. The air inside was thick, wet, heavy, like stepping into something alive. The walls breathed. The door shifted, and in the center of the room, Noah's backpack, covered in dust, untouched for weeks. Carter swallowed hard. And what? His voice barely carried. Somewhere down the hall, a door creaked open. Something moved inside the shadows. He forced himself forward, his breath shallow. The whisperer started, low, overlapping, too many voices at once. He walked deeper into the house. Each step felt like sinking. The floor stretched. The walls closed in, and then, at the end of the hall, Noah stood in the doorway. Except, it wasn't him. His skin was pale, too pale. His arms were too long, his fingers broken at strange angles. And when he spoke, his voice was not his own. "You came back." Carter's blood ran cold. Noah moved toward him. Not walking, gliding. His head tilted too far. His eyes were black voids. Carter stepped back. The hallway was gone. The house had changed. The walls were closing, pressing against his skin, the air squeezing his lungs. Noah's mouth stretched open, wider than a human should be able to. "Help me," he whispered again. But his voice was layered, like something else was speaking through him. Something inside him. Something that wasn't Noah. Carter turned and ran. The house shifted around him. Doors vanished. New ones appeared. He wasn't running through a house anymore. He was running through something alive, something hungry. The whispers followed him, growing louder, turning into screams. He turned a corner and slammed into her. The girl from Noah's dreams. The one in the tattered dress, her hair covering her face. She lifted a single finger to her lips. Everything went silent. The walls stopped shifting. Carter's breath came in gasps. She reached out, her small hand touching his wrist. His skin burned where she touched him. Then she pointed. A door appeared. It hadn't been there before. Bianca at moonlight. Carter didn't hesitate. He ran through it. He woke up in the middle of town, lying in the middle of the street, his clothes covered in dust, his hands covered in scratches. He turned. The house was gone. The empty lot where it had once stood was covered in dead grass, as if the house had never existed at all. His friends found him. They didn't believe what he told them. They said he must have had a breakdown, that the house had been torn down decades ago, that there was nothing there. Carter didn't argue, but later when he was alone, he checked his wrist. Where the girl had touched him, his skin was burned black, like something had marked him. And that night, as he lay in bed, just as he drifted into sleep, a whisper curled against his ear. "Let me out." His breath hitched. In the corner of the room, in the dark, something moved. Something small. Something waiting. Carter didn't move. Didn't breathe. He didn't need to. Because now, he knew he had never left the house at all.